Good morning.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Yeah, good. You?
Yeah, good. How are you
Whereabouts are
doing?
you?
I'm in Bradford-on-Avon near Bath with my dad.
So you're home, yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm coming down to Poole actually on Sunday.
How are you?
Yeah. To help my brother and his little girl.
Aw.
Yeah. So morning, Ida.
Morning.
How are you?
Good. Just time for morning practice. It was nice today.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. All right. I don't know if anyone else is joining on. So if anyone does, they'll just
Yeah.
Come in, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so when teaching a class, or both of you are wanting this from a teaching perspective, right?
Yeah, at least me, yeah.
So when doing a dynamic yoga flow, when you first start, it's nice to have a theme in your mind, whether it's back bends, forward fold, hamstrings, strength, whether you want it to be power, like aerobic, whether you want it to be more about finding steadiness, slowness. So you want to have some form of notion of what you want to achieve during the class. Once you've got that notion, sort of the formula that I'm going to give you will fit into that. So the formula that I use, and it's that I was taught it on my 200 hour, and I use it for my self practice and for all of my classes, is like a curve, basically. So you start low and you center everybody in, whether that's an Om, a breath, 3 breaths, namaste, whatever, it doesn't matter, but something just to bring the collective energy of the room together. That can be standing as well. That doesn't have to be sitting. So don't feel like you're limited to starting all your classes in a cross-seated position. You can start in Thunderbolt, like sitting on the heels. You could start standing, whatever you want. So the next section of it is it's the gentle warming section. So it's nothing of strain, nothing of any force, and I always have it leading from the position that you've centered in. So if I've started cross-legged, I will then reach the arms up and go over to the side and twist and forward, Sufi rolls, anything that gets them moving in that position. If I'm standing, then I ground them down through the feet. I connect all the parts of the body, get them up. Sometimes doing a really slow walk from the back of the mat to the front of the mat is really good, because it gets people into their bodies. And actually, if they do it with a lot of engagement, by the time they got to the top of their mat, they're actually like, quite warm. So that's the first stage. This can be as long as you want as well. So depending on the theme of your class and how long your class is, this could be anything from 3 minutes to 10 minutes. It's sort of, if it's a more of a hatha gentle class, you may want to spend longer in this process and take them from cross seat into tabletop, because there's so much that you can do from tabletop, because you've got 4 points of contact with the ground. So there's lots of limbs that you can move into different positions. So once you've done the gentle warming, the flow of energy is usually, it's flowing at that point, especially, like I would say, cue breath when you're doing the gentle warming, so that people are connecting breath with their body in slow motion. It helps with centering them in, and it helps move all the energy around the body before they actually start doing actual physical work. It also allows them to check in with themselves with any injuries or anything that's stiff. it's a good idea if you're doing like an hour's class, hour and a half class, in that gentle warming, if your focus is back bends, have a lot of stuff that's opening up the chest, or engaging the glutes and pressing the hips forward, something like opening up the hip flexors, like, so you can slowly start to warm up the areas of the body that you are later going to be fully opening up. It's a nice one for that. Then we come to sun salutations. Sun salutations have got a kind of reputation of being a warm-up, which they are, because they're very good at warming up the whole of the body, but they're far more than that. Like, in terms of the energetic lines that you open up with the movements of sun salutations, it's a full opening up to the cosmos. So there are two main sun salutations that I use. There's the Hatha sun salutations. Either they're the ones that Namit always used to do.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
And then you've got the Ashtanga sun salutations, which are far more strong. Depending on your class, Hatha is nicer, because there's you bring the knees, chest, chin down. It's not a full chaturanga, so it's far more opening of the chest and the hip flexors. So actually, like, the Hatha sun salutations are actually better in terms of opening up the body, and they are more dynamic, whereas the Ashtanga ones are definitely, they're much stronger. So if you're going into a power class, I would suggest do 3 Ashtanga Surya Namaskara A, 3B. If it's a really powerful class, do 5 of each, and that will really get people warm, and get all of the energy lines opening up within their body. Otherwise, I would suggest just like 2 or 3 sets of Hatha, because obviously you've got, for every 1 set of Hatha, it's actually 2, because you've got the right side and then you've got the left side. And when you're cueing it as well, when you're cueing the sun salutations, remind them that, when they are reaching up, they're reaching up to receive life. They're bowing down to life, so that there's an element of surrender that comes into the sun salutations, and it's not just an exercise. So much of yoga is now just an exercise, and people don't realize what they're doing. And when you start putting in those cues of like, open yourself up to receive, draw that energy in and bow down and surrender, it just gives another subliminal level of it, which they might not necessarily realize that they're taking in, but over time they will realize it. Okay, so they're warm now. They're definitely going to be. This is where the dynamic flow comes in, and this is completely up to you. I mean, you can do anything with them now. I mean, essentially, if you've done a gentle warm-up that has, that's gently opened up the hamstrings, and you want to do a lot of forward folds, if it you've opened up the heart a lot, especially if you've done the Hatha sun salutations, their chest and shoulders are going to be nice and open, their hip flexors are going to be nice and open. They're warm, the blood is pumping. Essentially, they're ready to do whatever you want. I would say, apart from strength work, like if you're going to do a lot of arm balances, do a wrist warm up in the gentle warming, get them into cat cow and get the wrist going, because even being in downward dog for some people is very, very strong on the wrists. So if you know that you're going to be holding downward dog in your sun salutations, whether they're Hatha or Ashtanga, do some wrist warm-ups beforehand if you know that you've got new people. And it could be anything, just in tabletop, shifting the weight from side to side, forward and back, sitting back on the heels, doing circles. I mean, just anything to help them with that. So that's the only addition that I would do if I was going to do strength. When you get into your dynamics, You can literally do what you want. So
yeah, but sort of if you have around the class, so there's someone that's just having class once a week, sort of to get the feeling that you got a little bit everything covered, I don't know.
Yeah, if it's a class that's once a week, I would do a little bit of wrist warm up. I would put an arm balance in there. If it's a general class once a week, I would try and give them a little bit of something every week.
Yeah.
So I would give them an arm balance. I would give them a heart opener. It's the flow that will always be a little bit different. And this is when your creativity comes in, and it's where your practice really comes in. I quite often start all my flows from downward dog. So I'll do a sun salutation to get them into downward dog, and then like raise one leg up, so like into three-legged dog. And from there, you can do so much. You can flip over to wild thing. You can step forward into the foot's in between the hands. You can rise up. Essentially, you need to get yourself into downward dog and go, say to yourself, what can I move and where? And from there, that's when you then find where your body can move. There's like thousands of yoga postures, and so many of them have basically been created in this way. Is just by, what can I move and where? And as long as you're cueing it with breath, you're allowing them to be in the posture. You're also allowing the students to be wherever they are at. There is no right or wrong alignment, because everybody's physiology is different. So you might have 3 people in a row all doing Trikonasana, for example, triangle pose, and they could all look completely different because of their hips, So it's allowing for that as well. This is one of the reasons why when I teach, I flow with the class. And I always say, I'm just a guide. I'm just calling out potential movements. But if it doesn't feel right for you and you want to do something else, do something else. I give the students that freedom. 9 times out of 10, they don't take it. But sometimes they do. And some students who have their own practice, they just go nuts. And that's quite fun to see. And it's quite encouraging to the other students as well, sometimes. But you want your dynamic thing to be about 10-15 minutes, I would say. Because if it's just a general class, like fitness levels are going to be medium, and you've already made them do, if you do sun salutations, sometimes like 5 and 10 minutes worth of sun salutations, people are exhausted, So if you kind of think, right, 5-10 minutes sun salutations, 10-15 minutes dynamic, then you've got basically 20-25 minutes of heat building, blood pumping cardio, right? In terms of actual like sequencing and like putting the postures together, you need to think to yourself, you got to think the transition is just as important as the posture. So if you're in Warrior 1, for example, and your next posture is lizard pose, you got to think how you're going to get there. And it might be in the transitions of thinking, I want to go from Warrior 1 to lizard pose, you discover other postures, because you've got to find a way to get there. And that's one of the reasons why people love dynamic flow vinyasa yoga, is because it's not static. So they feel like they're constantly moving and flowing, and it is like a dance, which means that from the teacher's perspective, we have to look at every aspect. So we can't just say Warrior 1, okay, now come down into lizard, because it's clunky. So you got to think, okay, how can I get there? Actually, I could go into Warrior 2, I could go into reverse warrior, I could fly all the way down to plank, and actually I could inhale halfway lift, and I could then come down into lizard. But you work that out through your own practice. When I first started teaching, I used to go out into the park and I used to write like at the top of my piece of paper, a lizard, for example. Like I would pick a pose or crow pose or whatever, and then I would put music on, headphones in, and I would start at one position and I would go through this sequence and I would have that keyword, that peak pose, that theme in my mind as I flowed. And if I did something that was really cool and I was like, oh, actually, I really like that, I would do stick figures. And the stick figure, I created, I mean, everybody sort of has their own shorthand for classes, but for me, stick figures were the easiest because it meant that during the class, I could simply look at the drawing and be like, oh yeah, that's where I am. And because I created it within my own flow, it's in my body, and the cueing of it then becomes easier. So once you've sort of flowed and you've worked it out, you might then come back to it and be like, I haven't got a single crow pose in this, or I haven't got a single lizard in it. Like it could have taken a completely different angle. That's okay. That's the class that you've created. Go with that. Sometimes these ideas that we have are merely seeds, and actually what's important is if it's flowing within your body, it's going to be in alignment with you, therefore it will be in alignment with your students. If it's not, they won't come back, which is fine. They'll go to another teacher and find alignment with them. So it doesn't matter. Once you've done the dynamic bit, you can kind of have fun with them a little bit. So if you want to say, or if you want to break the class up for a peak pose, this is a good place to do it because they're really warm. And if you do want to put a peak posture into it, you can make the dynamic flow shorter if you want. And you can give a demonstration on the peak flows, and you can then have playtime, get them working together, breaking the barrier of the mat. Granted, when we're going to be allowed to practice together in a studio again, who knows? So, but it's fun to give them playtime, and like everybody loves to go to a class and feel like they've learned something new and feel like they've been challenged. So if you think a peak pose isn't exciting enough, think to yourself, okay, well, when was it that I learned to do that? How long did it take me to be able to do Ekapada, for example, or crow pose, or bird of paradise? How long did it take? Like, because if it was a challenging pose for you, then it will be a challenging pose for somebody else. So, and give them time to play, because that's one thing that always used to annoy me about yoga classes, is that they would just like throw in this super amazing, cool pose, and then they would move straight on. And I'd be like, no, I want to come back to it. So the other way you can do that is if you want to put crow pose within a flow, or you want to put your peak pose in a flow, make sure that the flow revisits it.
Yeah.
And it comes back to it over and over again. So it's now time to cool down. Now, essentially, you can either do deep stretching at this point. So it's a sort of like a dynamic yin almost, because they are really warm and they are supple. But remember, when you are doing deep stretching, try and follow the formula of heart opening. So like if you want to do deep back bending, now's a good time to do it. But make sure you do that at the beginning of your cool down, because it's very, very energizing. Back bends, they open up all of the chakras, truly opening up the heart. So if you were to do that straight before Shavasana, they'll be flying around all over the place. So do your full extension back bends. The counter posture for that is then a forward fold. But again, be careful, because people have to have quite supple spines to be able to go from a full back bend to a forward fold. So a nice, bringing the knees into the chest while they're rolling on their back, that's a nice medium. And then they can roll backwards and forwards, up and down the spine, and then go down into a forward fold. And then that just releases the pressure and gets the fluid in between the vertebrae moving before it goes into the next position. So you've got back bend, forward fold just to counterbalance. Then you want to do hip openers. So this could be like lizard, wide leg, seated wide leg forward fold, box posture, box pose.
Posture, what's that?
Not box pose. What am I talking? Fire log. I mean fire log. When the legs are stacked. This is a good time to do your hip opening. Give people time in hip openers because there's a lot of emotions that are stored in the hips. So you want to really, like, if you're going to do a hip opener deep stretch, I would pick one or two. So one that's either like a wide legged forward fold or fire log, but on both sides, and give them time in it. 3 minutes. Give them time to relax and release and surrender and soften into it. It also really brings them down as well. It brings their energy into themselves. They can find sort of love and compassion for themselves after they've just probably put themselves through their own paces. You can bring them down. Once you've done hips, forward fold. Nice deep forward fold. And the forward fold calms the whole of the nervous system down because it stretches the meridian lines going all the way up the legs and up the back. And they're two of the largest meridian lines in the body. And when we forward fold, we fully extend that. So it really calms the nervous system down. Then you want to take a twist.
Twist after hip opener, after forward fold?
After. So if they're in forward fold, the nicest way is to lie down and take a twist, basically. And then they're ready for Shavasana.
But you said that either for forward fold, you go to either hip opener or twist, not follow them.
So you do hip opener, forward fold, and then lie down to a twist.
Okay.
Now that's one way to cool them down. The nice thing about that way is that essentially you've got 4 postures in your mind. You can give them a good 3 to 5 minutes in each of the postures. It will really calm them down and really settle them to go into Shavasana. So if you only have 10 minutes, 15 minutes left, even 5 minutes left, you can actually do those 4 pretty rapid and they'll still calm down. So that's like your fallback formula. The other way to cool down is more of the sort of like Iyengar, Ashtanga kind of a way, which is back bend, forward fold, headstand. Because headstand is actually like, if it's in people's practice, headstand is so therapeutic, but it takes people a while to get there. So headstand is usually a peak pose, but that can be a peak pose as long as you then go straight into cool down afterwards. From headstand, you can go into shoulder stand and any of the halasana variations. Fish pose after halasana. So if you think you've done this with the throat, you then want to open the throat. So it's the counter pose. From fish pose, then it's, forward fold, supine twists, happy baby, anything that's, once people are on their backs at the end of a yoga class, you don't want to move them. So, because they don't want to move and their energies have gone into the mat and that's it, they're done. So if you are doing the like headstand, shoulder stand, fish pose, I would then go happy baby. And then the forward fold element, they're bringing the knees into the chest. So for the therapeutic benefits of a forward fold, their legs don't have to be extended. Essentially, what's important it's this. This is the important bit, the tummy in contact with the thighs and the stretching of the glutes that way. If you do that, that's what makes it therapeutic. so the legs don't have to be fully extended. So once they've done fish pose, they could bring the knees into the chest and give themselves a rock and a hug, and it'll still instill the same benefits. And they're lying down, you don't have to get them back up to then forward fold, which is quite nice. And then twist shavasana. So, and that's the shavasana should always be 10% of the class. So if it's a 60-minute class, do a 6-minute shavasana. 90-minute class, 9-minute shavasana.
So I'm going to be teaching mainly beginners and more sort of probably hatha style to start with. Then when they've done their 6 weeks building up, then I will sort of do some hatha with some flow. And so that's when, so it'll be really like starting from basics. So this will be like the next one or the one after on.
Yeah.
But I'm sort of quite okay with building the hatha quite slowly. Got quite a few things to do. And the sequencing is much easier when it's hatha and slower. Obviously you've still got to think about where you're going from which pose. But it was because it was the vinyasa flow that was sort of like, I was like, oh. But now
it's a lot to remember as well when you're teaching a vinyasa flow. Like some of my teacher friends have got an incredible memory for it, so they will create a flow in their practice and they'll almost mark the flow out. They won't fully do it, and they'll know that it's taken them 15-20 minutes to mark out the flow, and that's it. It'll be in their mind and they'll be able to cue it perfectly the next day. That was never me. So I had to do stick figures, and then I would plan all of these classes with these beautiful stick figures and wonderful flows and very exciting and creative, and the class would show up in front of me and it would not be within their capabilities. So that was then when I had to make it up on the spot. And that's when I realized how important my practice was. So my practice, the second layer of intention behind it was always to create new flows, create new ways of moving, so that whatever happened in a class, I would have stuff in my body ready to go. And in terms of cueing as well, because it's all very well having the movements in your head and having the flows, but you got to think about how you are delivering that to the people. Now Ida knows this because she did teacher training with me in January. When you're practicing, say out loud what it is that you want to move and where, and think in your mind like you have no body awareness. So you break down every transition and you try and say everything that's happening at that moment. Everyone has their own way of cueing. So some people are very floaty and very fairy and very like, float your arms up to the sky, open up to the sun, bring the hands that, like, some people are very like that. Other people are very dynamic, and use scientific terms because that's how they work. So it's about finding your way. Just make sure that you're saying as little as possible with the most amount of direction, essentially, and then you'll find your language to do that. So like a friend of mine, for his forward fold was simply bow down to the earth. That's what he said. And because it didn't matter, it didn't matter whether they were engaging their glutes or lifting up their thighs or extending the spine or have a flat back. That didn't matter to him. What matters to him within his practice was the surrender down into the earth and the body movement that came with that. So that was his language, whereas other teachers are very much like lift up from the top of the thigh, reach the arms up, send, tilt the pelvis forward, send, dive down, chest out, bum out, fly all the way down. Other people are very dynamic because they want you to feel an extension of the body. So it depends on you, on your practice and what you want to share, essentially. There is no right or wrong. There is no right or wrong. We're all different. Everybody has their own way of thinking and their own practice. And if you're a very scientific person and you have a very spiritual person come to your class, the likelihood is that they're not going to come back. But equally, the other way around as well. You know, everybody has their tribe, and it's what's important is that it's authentic for you. So never think, I saw, you know, if you see something that's really, really cool, or you heard something, like if it resonates with you, then take it on board. But if it doesn't, don't. Like, I will only ever use the cue, engage your glutes, if it is absolutely necessary, which essentially camel pose. It's very, very essential that you squeeze the butt. Sorry, I just got a thing from Zoom. I don't know. Yeah, like in camel pose, it's important that they engage the butt because it supports the lower back and enables them to be able to lift up and feel the openness. But in a forward fold, I would not say it's essential. Or in a downward facing dog, I would not say it's essential to me in my practice. So therefore I don't say it. So, but yeah, the best thing I can say, like if you follow that formula for vinyasa, they'll always get a well-rounded class for sure. In terms of the content, it's where that's where your practice comes in, your themes, and you just got to get on the mat and you've got to play basically, and record yourself as well. Like record yourself cueing, record yourself doing it so that you can see what you're doing, because sometimes, you know, we're cueing and what we're saying is not what we're doing because we haven't seen ourselves do it. So it's important to see and hear what your students are going to be seeing and hearing. You won't need to do this forever either. Like, this is what I did for my first maybe year of teaching. Now I don't. I mean, I do my lives every morning at 8 a.m. and at 5 to 8, I'm in the garden with a cup of coffee. And then 2 minutes to 8, I come in, click live and sit down and do it. You know, like it's in me now. But for the first year, I was planning all my classes. I was practicing 2 hours a day. I was filming and recording and, you know, getting people in just to listen to me. You know, I was putting that effort and energy in, but it was that sequence that enabled me freedom, because it gave me a structure that I could work with. And within that structure, you can do whatever you want, which is wonderful. But it is a structure that at least allows, you know, you have confidence that if you follow that structure, your class is going to flow.
How did you know when you were ready? Did you just think, oh, I feel it, I'm ready now? Or,
I was teaching before I was ready.
Right.
As soon as I did my 200 hour, I spent a month in the UK and I went straight back to Australia and I was doing classes on the beach. I just knew that I had to start teaching. It wasn't really a question of whether or not I felt ready. I don't think that was really an element of it. I knew I had to do it. It was like a calling. I just knew I had to do it. And the students that I had, I mean, are now very good friends of mine, and they're all in Australia, and they follow my lives, and like they've been with me through that journey, and it's lovely. And a lot of them were beginners or hadn't done yoga for a long time, so it's really good to teach beginners because they stay with you. And you learn so, like, teaching middle-aged beginners, you will learn so much. I mean, just the variety of capability and inability of people will just blow your mind. And you'll learn what cues work and what don't. You'll learn what cues work with certain people and not with others. I taught a group of old women. I mean, they were like 70 and 80, and they were my superheroes. Like, they couldn't do anything when I first started with them. One of them couldn't even put her hands flat on the ground because she had arthritis. So it was really, really gentle yoga. And my cueing, I suddenly realized that I swore a lot. And you know, they really, because of teaching them, I learned how to slow down. I learned how to break moves down even further. And within about 6 weeks, 2 months, they were properly doing downward facing dog, and they were doing sun salutations, and they were doing short flows, and it was amazing. But they taught me how to slow down and how to break everything down. So
one of my groups will be people with arthritis, so that will be a challenge.
Yeah, it is very challenging. Just think, like, with arthritis, gentle movement, like continuous gentle movement is integral, and it is going to hurt. They are going to be in pain, because because it's inflammation, like they are, but it's one of those pains that actually the more they move, the less it will become. Exactly. So you kind of have to be very gentle with that, and never do anything for too long. Circles. No. So like
their wrist.
Yeah, and sort of, work on their wrists for a little bit, then work on their shoulders, then hips, then feet or legs or whatever, and then come back to the wrists. So you kind of you come back around, because then they understand. But I think it's that sort of going through that cycle. They're not just doing 30 seconds on one wrist in an hour. They're actually doing 2 minutes, but it's spread out, and that reduces the pain for them as well. So remember that your students are always going to be a reflection as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're there as a guide, and you're there to learn from them as much as they are for you. So
yeah, totally. Well, I have 2 lots of arthritis, and I've got to where I am through not being able to do hardly anything. So that's why I've got a lot of people that want to do it, because obviously they've seen how I've progressed. And so therefore I know how slow to go when sometimes they can't even put their hand on the floor. They might have to use a chair, and, it is going to be a slow process for some of them, but I'm prepared to go forward with them with it.
And you were like, yeah, it'll be a wonderful journey. And that's, your story is always the type of people that you will attract generally.
It's interesting. So I won't be doing that many flows I won't be doing flows with them, but maybe eventually.
Maybe eventually you'll get there, and they will get there, and I bet you they'll get there quicker than you think as well. Like just be yourself. Another good thing about recording yourself talking out loud as you're doing your flow is that you can actually hear your voice. Like, you need to make sure that you're speaking as your voice, your personality, and not some strange yogi persona voice. Because there is, we've all got a yoga teaching voice, but it's important that voice is genuinely a part of your personality and not a persona that you are putting on. I hear a lot of teachers, and then you hear them speak and you're like, who are you? Like, it's completely different. And just the more authentic you can be, and have a laugh with them. Like, don't be afraid. If you make a mistake, one, they won't realize, but if it is like you've done the left side and you go to do the right side and you're on the left side and you're like, how have I got here? Like, just laugh about it and be like, sorry guys, back up, all right, everyone to the top of their mat, sorry, rewind, like, make a laugh and a joke about it, because people put yoga teachers up on pedestals. We almost need to break that pedestal down and be like, nah, we're just as human as you. We just so happen to have been through some training and practice this ourselves so that we're able to share that with you. Like, but there is no difference. We're all in this together, and we're all doing this together. So don't be afraid at all.
Just one question.
Yes,
question backbend. What would be a good backbend to start with? So if they're having a beginners, I got the feeling that the ones I'm doing yoga for now, they are more beginners, because they thought they was let's get moving. So
good backbend for beginners. bridge pose. So when you're lying on the ground and your knees are bent and you bring the pelvis up, that's good because they can use their own strength by engaging the butt, pressing the hips up, or they can support themselves. So that's a good back bend. Another one is when you're in low lunge, so the knees on the ground, and they reach the arms up and then open to the side. And if they do that movement of like inhale the arms up, open up, and lift up through the chest and press the hips forward, that's a back bend. And then when they open their own arms wide, they'll find they'll be able to go deeper into it. And you can put that into so many standing postures. You can put it into your sun salutation. So without even realizing it, people are opening up. Because when you do camel, especially for beginners, it's quite.
Yeah, I can't really think of myself either. So. Yeah,
it's tricky. So you want to kind of build them up in other ways, and low lunge or crescent moon, high lunge, they're good ones to do because they're opening up the hip flexors one at a time, and it's opening up the chest, and people start to feel results in it quite quickly. One to be careful of, like when you're doing sun salutations and people reach up. When they reach up, like I think can't see me. Shit. If they if you want to get them to lift up with their hands and lift up with their chest. If you want them to start leaning back, make sure they engage the glutes and press the hips forward, and even bring the hands behind, because even you want to be really careful of that compression. So I would just steer clear of that. Of trying to get people to lean back when they're in standing up, reaching. Just I wouldn't do it unless they're at a point. Same with camel pose, and implement back bends in other postures. Because you can even do it in warrior one. You can have them standing straight, spine nice and straight, and then next pose of it is open up to cactus. And then lift the chest up. I quite often, I say, bring your finger in between your boobs onto your chest bone, and imagine there's a piece of string lifting you up from that, and then that gives the back bending action to so many postures. Because back bending is not about bending the back; it's about opening up the front of the chest and opening up the hip flexors. So. Virasana is a good, so like thunderbolt pose. Hang on. It's really funny being in this house. There's just no space anywhere. When you're like that, can you see butt is in between? If they're on get them sitting on a block and get them lift the hips up and get them to walk back. That's also very, very good for opening up the quads. So for back bends, that's really important. And also actually for people now sitting all the time, this is wonderful. And if they've got a bolster, get them to sit on the bolster and then have the bolster going down their spine so that they can lie all the way down. But quite often people will need a lot of bolsters to be able to do that. There's no such thing as too many props.
But what's another name in Yin? It's called saddle, but what's his name in Hatha? I suppose?
I think it's Supta Virasana.
Supta
Virasana. V-I-R-S.
Virasana.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's Virasana supine, so yeah, that would make sense. But yeah, there's never too many props. So I mean, it's like for the moment, if we're teaching online, which I think is going to be the way for the next few months, if you're doing classes with people and they are beginners, you almost, I would say, especially if they're very beginners, do it over Zoom so that you can really see their body, so that you can make sure that they're not doing anything that's going to hurt themselves. give them attention, because there is no right or wrong way in every pose, because everybody's body is different. However, you want to make sure that they're at least in the right semi-alignment, you know. So if they're in warrior 2 and their hips are facing forward, their back knee is going to be on a lot of pressure because it's going to be twisting. So it's little things like that when teaching beginners, especially online like this, where you can't just be in the room and just, you know, lightly open up the chest. You can't put your hands on their hips just to open them up. You can't do that. So we are going to have to spend more time in each postures and giving them physical cues to get them to try and open up themselves. And a lot of the time people's bodies are wanting to open and wanting to move, but it's the mind that's telling them that they can't. So if you're teaching 2 people in the same house, you know, get the other person to do the assist that you would do to that person if you're not with them. So like when you're in warrior 2, for example, all I do in warrior 2 is just put my hands on top of their shoulders. So if they're like this, I come along and I just do that, and they automatically move their shoulders down. Get the other person in the room to do that to them, and then vice versa. Like that's a nice way to do it. It also gets them working together. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I'm going to do any online stuff out there, because I don't really even have a following or clients or anything yet, because I've only just literally come back from India a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm brand new. So I've got a friend who's a complete beginner. She's a friend, and I might just do some stuff with her as a one-to-one, just to see how my teaching is and see how she responds to it.
Okay.
Because I think it might be irresponsible of me to just put myself out there and see what happens. I don't really want to do that. I'd rather wait and use this time to get as much knowledge and get everything together, so that when we can start do classes again, I've got the people that want to come already. I've got the following. I just don't feel it'd be right for me to do that personally.
Fair enough. Well, and do what feels right. And if it might be that one-on-ones, especially now, people might allow you to go into their homes.
Well, I'll do it virtually one-to-one rather than go in their home. But I mean, it's a friend, so I feel comfortable doing that with her.
Yeah, okay.
But I think I'm just going to wait, I think, and use the time to get the knowledge and do what
better. We go to Zoom, if you get big classes, you can't really follow. I had the class the other day with 6 students on Zoom, and sort of I lost control about this. So
really?
Yeah.
But that's amazing that you had 6 students online.
Yeah, it was a company class, so I had a company, and we did adjust cameras as well, so you could see all of them. That we had to work the next one to adjust the cameras. I saw a lot of living rooms.
Yeah, the one thing about, but when you like, if it's a one-to-one, that's a bit different because you can spend time, and that's good that you're doing that, because that will build up confidence for you. And if she enjoys it and she wants to get more friends in on it, then
that's
keep
fine.
doing the one-on-one with them, so that you can know where they're at. In terms of getting used to teaching virtually and not being able to see them, I never see my classes. I don't see my people anymore because I'm live on Facebook, and I just hope to God I'm doing it. I had 3 friends message me this morning going, I was watching you do yoga and I was just sat on my coffee and I'm really hungover, and I'm like, this is not the point. This is not the point. But
yeah,
it doesn't matter.
No.
I mean, the biggest thing is just do as much as you can, practice as much as you can. You know, think I've got half an hour, right? And a fun task is think of 3 very, very different poses. So like crow, forward fold, and let's say fish pose. And you've got to get from one pose via 5 other poses. So you've got 3 poses that you've got to get to, and then you've got to go through 5 different poses to get to that pose, and you've got to make it as fun or as interesting as possible. Like, that's quite a fun way, and by that as well, you'll create new yoga postures, which I guarantee they've probably already been created.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's a fun way to get the mind thinking, you know, what can I move and where, and it just opens up that creativity because you've got a purpose, you've got somewhere to get to, and you've got to get to through 5 different poses. I've created some incredibly interesting sequences by doing that, and got myself tangled up into a few knots also by doing that. But it's fun, and we have a lot of time on our hands right now, so
that's a good plan. You can do that.
So, but let me know how you get on, and if you know, when you start teaching one-on-one, if anything comes up, just send me a message. I mean, me and Ida are in contact quite a lot, and I'm with it with so many of my students. Like, all I have is time, so if there's anything that I can do to help, or even if it's just to be like, you know, you've got a lesson plan and you're not too sure, just send it across. I'm happy to.
Yes, like I said, I also started making stick figures, so if I can send you some of it, I will review it.
Yeah, have you sent it to me?
No, I haven't. I didn't send you because I didn't get a message back, so I wasn't sure if it was time to send it. So.
Oh, I did message back. Okay, sorry, that's fine. We can look at that now if you want. That's fine.
Yeah, okay. Oh.
So.
Okay.
I got some ideas now, so.
Okay, fair enough. Or another, send it to me, email or message, and I'll have a look.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
But yeah, if you need any tips, or if you do want to just talk, I'm here.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
No worries. Have a great day, guys. Mwah.
Have a good day. Got to go now. Bye. Bye. Bye, Olivia.